You're listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. I am Aaron Franz, and here with me is my co-host, Adam. How are you doing today, Adam?
Oh, not so bad. I think, like last month, I am tired once again because I've been, fairly busy. So again, another caution to the audience: if I end up going off on tangents, then I was sounding a bit off. It's just because I'm very, very tired. But otherwise okay. And I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have on this particular installment of Thieves and Memes.
Yeah, well, same here. I'm definitely tired. Had a lot going on my end, so. Try to stay awake with the two of us today. We'll do our best. I mean,
we'll do our best. Yeah.
When it comes to the film we're talking about today, they made every effort to make it exciting and action-packed as they could, the filmmakers, because this is the fourth Transformers movie we're reviewing today. Well, what is the subtitle of this one, Adam?
It's Age of Extinction. That was something I found very interesting. I thought, when I saw the poster for it, I was thinking, like, it got in a number of different directions here. Uh-huh. And, of course, they allude to a few ideas, not that strongly, but, at points throughout the film regarding the concept of the extinction, like an extinction type event where, one species is wiped out, another and takes over or whatever. Yeah, that kind of thing. So it got me thinking about those types of things. But when I went and saw the film, it wasn't really kind of what I was expecting. No. And I'll get into that as the interview progresses, and because there are a whole bunch of reasons for why that is. But at the same time, even though it wasn't what I was expecting, there was some fairly interesting points to look into and things to talk about. So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect going into this. I'm at a point where I don't even know what movies are coming out, you know what I mean? Because
it's total saturation at the moment. It's crazy. Yeah.
It's nutty. I was so tired from moving into my new house. I'd just been doing that nonstop that I decided to get out. So it was just like a night out, and I just kind of happened to go to this movie. I was like, oh, Transformers 4, and Uncle wanted to see it, so we went to go see Transformers 4. I'm like, okay, this should be interesting. And I was definitely taken aback by the movie because, I am very familiar with the series. It's something that we've talked about a bit in the past, these Transformers movies, how important they have been. Because I know that the first two Transformers movies definitely were produced with the help of the Air Force in a big way. Yeah. I'm not sure about the third one, and I don't think that this one was either.
No, I think you're right. There is basically a list of films that you can get on the FOIA legislation from the Department of Defense, whereby that you request a document regarding all the films that they've had participation in officially, and they'll give it to you. And one of our mutual friends has done this and given us a copy, and I've had a look at that document, and it doesn't say anything about number 3 or number 4. But does feature films that were released after those. So, as we know the document's up to date, and so that would seem to suggest what they're saying is, no, we didn't have any involvement in this film. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, because I think, as we may have also discussed before, there's other ways that the Department of Defense and the other big organizations can influence the outcome of a film. It doesn't have to be through official liaisons and contracts. It can be just done through other types of influences.
Yeah, it could just be because they're friends at that point. Be like, hey, look, and they're sitting over lunch. You're like, put this idea in there. Why not?
Well, they've all been directed by Michael Bay for a start. So he worked with the military on the first two, and it's like by the third time around, he was like, right, I don't need your help. I know what to do. So yeah. Maybe that's what happened here.
And the producer is Spielberg too.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't see that actually. That's interesting. That says a lot. That says a lot. He doesn't generally get involved with anything that isn't significant in one way or another. Yeah. That's just the best, the best way I could put it, really. If you look at everything he's ever been involved in, it's been, extremely significant in terms of themes and memes, Yeah.
And he's worked with the military and the CIA.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody else.
Yeah. He's the most well-known director of our age, basically. Really. There's a couple of other guys that are up there. You've got guys like what's his name? He directed Avatar again.
Oh yeah. James Cameron.
Yeah, James Cameron. There's a few others as well, and you've got sort of newcomers who are coming in like Christopher Nolan and stuff like that. But at the same time, Spielberg, you know, he's been well known. Well known. He's a big name, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he produced all of them. Almost certain he's produced every single one of these films, Transformers series.
Yeah, well, wouldn't surprise me. You know, it's the kind of thing that I think he would want to get involved with on a directorial basis, because, you know, I think he probably holds himself in slightly higher esteem in terms of like any artistic kind of like faculty going on there. But you know, I think he's probably you know, fairly happy to get involved in the production and make some cash, you know, and influence the film in maybe some way. Who knows? You know.
The thing is, when we're talking about the Air Force and the Pentagon helping out with these films, it was kind of obvious with the first two how that would be the case. You know, just the themes in the film, the messages in the film that are being portrayed are pro-military and pro-United States foreign policy, things like that.
Yeah,
and it's
pro-establishment.
Yeah, it's real cut and dry. The third movie I haven't seen, so I can't speak to it.
That was like the bridge between the two, like number 2 and number 4. I mean, obviously it was, but in terms of the shift in content, I think we're talking about here. I think that was, if you've not seen number 3, you'll see they start bringing in ideas which are much closer in line with ideas that were in Transformers 4, the one we're going to review tonight. Yeah. So if you've not seen that, maybe go back and check it out, because you'll see they take on a slightly different tone in that one too.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about the last two not having been done by the Pentagon and being quite different in a lot of ways. I mean, very, very much the same in some ways, but you know, they've got a different political flavor to them, if you will. They're almost a countercultural spin. They're playing homage to a lot of different themes that they wouldn't have otherwise done, you know. So
it's almost as if they're flipping on the other side. And with this fourth movie, if you look at it knowing that the first two were produced by the Air Force and now they're kind of getting away from that, one could be led to the conclusion that like the directors and the producers and all that are kind of feeling vindicated in breaking free from that, and therefore they make the establishment the villain, because that's what happens in this movie. The establishment, in essence, is the villain. And that was the part of this movie. As I was sitting there watching it, the whole time I was just trying to figure out, okay, what is going on here? How should we go about explaining this? I think it just simply, we should say from the start that the CIA is portrayed quite negatively in this film. They're like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, the plot is almost negligible. You know, it really, it's almost not even worth going into. I mean, we'll give a brief outline of what happens as we go along, but I mean, it's so stupid and uninteresting and you know, cartoonish that it's not even really worth trying to sort of explore. But I mean, I mean, you've got a situation where the head of the CIA, who you know has previously been praised as being the great defender of the nation and working with the military and the Transformers to fend off the evil Transformers, you know, the Decepticons, etc.
The good and the bad Transformers. They worked with the good to fight off the bad.
That's right.
And now they're fighting the bad and the good and just saying all the Transformers are bad.
That's right, because you've got this. You've got Kelsey Grammer playing a sort of a super corrupt megalomaniac CIA director who has basically discovered that there's been an archaeological discovery, which is, you know, one of the first scenes in the film where an archaeologist finds a type of metal. You know, that basically the Transformers were made out of. They, you know, patented it and called it transformium, but realized that this was like some kind of super high-tech nanometal or something that could be, you know, electronically charged and programmed to form certain patterns. You know, we've seen this type of meme come up in a lot of other sci-fi fiction films recently as well. You know, it's you know, you just see this sort of swarm of little particles all swarming around each other and forming like a, you know, an object. You know, it could be a person, it could be or maybe not a person, but you know, it could be any type of machine you want. You know,
in this movie, they made a point to have the nanoparticles turn into very specific products that you can go out and buy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it was in essence just a bunch of commercials. Yeah,
there was a ton of product placement in that film. It was like
obscene. It was very
like
bad.
it was like this. Okay, the latest Camaro, the latest Audi, the latest fucking BMW. You know, when they went to China, it was like just
it turned into a boom box. It turned into what else? I forget, stuff like that. It was silly.
Yeah. It was really silly. I remember seeing a lot of that, especially when they went to China. It was like all Chinese advertising, for big Chinese corporations.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I can't remember the names. They're sort of harder to remember for obvious reasons. But I mean, I remember just seeing like there were so many scenes that there was just a big advertisement in the background, just like a huge latent advertisement, or someone was using a product which had a very, very clear brand written on it. It was easily readable to the audience. It was deliberate product placement. I remember seeing a lot of that in the part of the film where they go to China, but also, of course, in the parts where they're in the US as well.
Yeah, this movie was. Man, it was definitely a silly action film, as we were saying, and it gets ridiculous. Yeah. It was way too long. It kept going, but the whole time, for the first part of it, I'd say for the first third of it especially, I was sitting there trying to understand what the heck was going on, like what they were doing, because again, the CIA is portrayed as evil pretty much right from the start. You got that Kelsey Grammer character as the director of the CIA. He's heading all these black ops, which the White House secretary comes in, tries to get information on, and he's getting nowhere with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you have this mercenary army, like sort of like a Blackwater or something. I think that's what it was. Either that or it was CIA special forces of some kind. I think it was a mercenary army under the employ of the CIA. It's something like that.
One of those collaborations, they do it all the time. The CIA, if it needs a job done, recruit just like a special division of the Army Special Division. Whatever. They'll find a group of guys that are trained in whatever needs to get done. But I digress. Go on.
Yeah, and the mercenaries were tracking down the protagonists and doing horrible things to them. So it was quite clear, okay, the CIA is evil. And they're going after innocent people, and they're also going after the benevolent Autobots.
Yeah, that's right. Who tried to save them, who worked with them in good faith and tried to save them, and all that happened was, there ended up being a war, and people ended up hating the Transformers, and, they all went into hiding, and blah, 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 and so you've got, I mean, I'm not sure if it's so much. I mean, I guess, it could definitely be interpreted in terms of like the CIA being the antagonist, or the CIA being evil as a whole, but they do focus in on the director of the CIA, I think, more than anyone else. So they've kind of got that kind of one bad apple idea in there, well, maybe the organization isn't so bad, but we've got like a corrupt CIA director, and it wouldn't be so bad if he wasn't there, because that's a commonly sort of seen theme that is put into films. You always get the lone sort of bad apple, the guy who tries to take over the company or whatever, or wants to take over the world or whatever it may be, rather than the organization. But again, it's not as if it's not as if they're portraying the CIA in a positive light by any means, which is in pale comparison to the or in strong comparison, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry.
It's just so much different in the previous movies. It's on the other side of the spectrum.
Sorry, contrast. Yeah. Sorry again, folks. I'm so tired right now to barely think. But yeah, strong contrast to the previous two films. Yeah, definitely, and portraying the CIA, who's previously been the hero, the heroic organization, as the villain in this film. Yeah, definite political U-turn there.
Well, I was surprised that they throw a lot of ideas that would be familiar in conspiracy culture and alternative media, actually. You've got the CIA, the black budget CIA, the projects that the White House doesn't know about, things like that, are discussed in this film. You've got the CIA working in tandem with industry, the technological industry. You've got basically a character that is something like Steve Jobs,
Steve Jobs and Ray Kurzweil.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, Ray Kurzweil and Steve Jobs mixed together. He owns this company that is a high technology company that, you know, they're producing the consumer electronics like Apple does, but they're also a military industrial company, and they're kind of covertly working with the CIA on this stuff in the background. And so that is brought out too, the cooperation of government and private industry to, and not only to work together, but to do specifically bad things.
Well, yeah,
you know I mean,
that's what they're trying to do in this film. Is, you know, the CIA director and the head of this, you know, this big you know, technology corporation have got you know, a plan to, you know, take this, as I previously mentioned before, this metal that they've found that basically constitutes what the Transformers are made of, and use it to make their own army of drone robots, you know, to create a world of freedom and peace, you know. And obviously they say that it's almost meant to be in a sarcastic tone, but I mean, that's what they say. It's that's their reason behind doing this, you know, is to create, you know, a world without war, you know, by building an army of, like, you know, 1 million bloody massive big killing machines.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right.
It's just like.
And of course it's ironic because they're fighting the Transformers and they're saying that they're all evil, but they're at the same time just making their own Transformers to do it, and then that's going to take over. So it's the same thing in essence that they're doing. And they also mention terrorism a few times in this too. So the idea that the government uses the threat of terrorism to I don't know, for lack of a better term, enslave the people. That's a bad way of saying it, but you know what I mean, to deceive and do bad things to the people in the name of protecting them from terrorism. That idea is brought up more than once too.
Yeah, that was definitely in there a few times. I think there's probably quite a few little bits in the film that I missed because I saw it in 3D, which is I think probably a bit of a mistake because I actually find that the 3D doesn't make a film more realistic. It kind of puts you into a trance and I actually miss a lot. And I mean, you're probably subconsciously ingesting a lot of stuff, but on a conscious level, it kind of puts you into a bit of a trance and you kind of drift off. And it's a weird thing, actually. You know, I mean, there's you know, sort of. I believe the Pentagon has come out on at least one or two occasions and talked about technology that they've developed where they can literally put you into a different state of mind just through the use of pixelation and, you know, like high definition and 3D imagery, you know, that can sort of weaponize it and actually change your state of mind, like, you know, put you into a sort of a trance-like state or make you very, very angry or make you fall asleep. Or, I mean, I think there was even one instance where they said that, you know, if a certain type of technique was applied, they could actually stop your heart just through visual imagery. And so it makes me kind of wonder when you see a film like Transformers in 3D with me, and I just found, as I said, I just found myself like in this kind of trance-like state where I almost sort of didn't really know and didn't really care what was going on. It was just kind of just like just blown away by the visual stimuli. It was so overwhelming, you know. Yeah. And so it makes me wonder about, you know, what type of, you know, maybe perhaps subliminal messages, you know, are being delivered whilst, you know, you're seeing the film in such an intense way, you know.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this a bit before, not so much on the podcast, but you and I have talked about this. And I know that from my experience going to 3D movies, and luckily I didn't see this one in 3D because I agree with you, I don't like them. It does make me feel a certain way, and it does feel as though... hold on. It feels as though when you're watching a 3D movie that you're dreaming, to me.
Yeah, it's like a dream. It was like a dream. It was just, you're sort of, I don't know, it's like a weird different state of consciousness. You're kind of half paying attention to the movie, but half kind of thinking about other things, and half kind of just not really thinking about anything at all. It was a weird sort of, it's a very hard state of consciousness to describe, but it wasn't in line with the sort of commonly conceived idea that 3D is supposed to make films more realistic, supposed to draw you in further, supposed to make you, you know, feel what the characters feel, and, you know, make the whole experience more visceral and more powerful, you know, and more intense. You know, I mean, I think yeah, it definitely wasn't the case for me, and I really wonder about why 3D is being so heavily promoted and why so many films now. I mean, if you look just in the past few years, the rate at which films are being published or released rather in 3D is increasing almost exponentially. And so it makes me wonder about why and what's going on there, and the whole mechanism that seems to be at work here, where the 3D effect actually puts you into kind of a subliminal state. And I think for that reason, there's probably quite a few bits of the film that I probably can't consciously remember. I mean, things that actually went on that that are probably some buried in my subconscious somewhere, but that I can't consciously talk about. So yeah, that's a weird one. But yeah,
I've read some of the other reviews of this film, and almost all of them say the same thing, that the movie went on, and there were so many action sequences that just continued and continued and continued.
So long, yeah.
And all the reviewers were saying that they got tired from this. And
that's it. That's actually, yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at. Actually, it was just I actually got fed up. Like it was like I was like, come on, just slow things down just for a second or two here, because it was literally just like crazy CGI robots fighting and leveling cities for like 2.5 hours or something, just from start to finish, with a very, very thin, flimsy plot, with thin cardboard characters, and a kind of a contrived plot, if you will, but which still contains some interesting ideas, which we'll discuss.
Yeah, it's just, and the whole time I was struggling against that. I was trying to sit there and think about what they were saying with the story, and then the story really does end up getting lost in the action about halfway through the film. It just keeps going with the action. It's like, okay, you forget about the story because it kind of stops in essence.
That's actually kind of it. Yeah, the story. It's almost like the story just becomes secondary to just the visual stimuli, the visual sequences. Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. When you think about this in terms of the Air Force helping out on a film, and the first two films being helped by the Air Force, when they work on a movie, they want to make sure that certain ideas are put in the movie and that the story is good, actually, and it works in portraying their ideas. So perhaps when you let Michael Bay out loose on his leash
on his own,
it's just him just doing special effects action scenes to no end.
Was it him that did Battleship, or was it somebody else? Because Battleship was like the best case or the worst case that I can give people of just ridiculous action with almost no plot at all.
That was so bad. That was a Navy film.
Oh, was it?
To me, Battleship was the Navy's answer to Transformers. They're like, oh, Transformers movie really worked for the Air Force. We got to make one of those movies, and they did that, and it was just a total turd. It didn't work.
It was. Bordering on unwatchable. I watched it until maybe a couple of minutes, before the end, just because I was, I don't know, bored or tired or whatever. But I was very unimpressed with that. This movie is Transformers 4. I think is at least a little better than that, but not by much. Not by much. I would say a little bit better, but not by much. I mean, it's difficult to. I don't know. It's difficult to sort of talk about the relevant concepts in this film, because they're so kind of just scattered around and dispersed with all this crazy action that it's hard to sort of piece together the plot and piece together the sequence of events in a kind of significant way.
It's kind of like a lot of conspiracy theories out there. They'll get you thinking about all this crazy stuff, but it never really goes anywhere into any cohesive concept, and just makes you more confused than you were before.
It's just kind of dropping it's almost just like dropping a bunch of sort of key sort of concepts from that from that sort of demographic, from that the sort of conspiracy demographic, or for lack of a better term, or truth movement type topics or whatever. And if you haven't seen the third one, you'll see the same thing. They sort of play on some of the ideas that are out there in the kind of the UFO type movements and stuff like that, to do with things like relics being found on the moon and alien ruins, and they even bring on Buzz Aldrin, and there's kind of a NASA connection there, and it's all tied into the secret space program and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of they really in the third one they really do play homage to a lot of the ideas in the kind of UFO movement or sort of crowd, if you will. And so in the fourth one, they sort of take it to a new level, and I guess are sort of playing to even more demographics, or at least a wider set of demographics, in terms of just generally just dropping the odd sort of nugget of conspiracy fare in there, but as you said, like not in a cohesive manner that actually goes anywhere or explains anything, but just kind of pays homage to it or nods to the fact of its existence,
Yeah, I'm just the whole time I was trying to determine what the purpose would be in doing this and presenting these conspiratorial type ideas, or whatever you want to label them. What was the purpose of the filmmakers in doing this? Because clearly they were doing it. It was written in there very obviously. So what was the reason? And as we were saying before, they worked on the previous films with the establishment. Likely, they're still friends with all those guys and like getting some ideas for this film just because they're friends, if nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, they could have been given a script, for all we know. Like, right, you've worked with us twice, you know what to do. Here's the script. Basically make sure that you include all of these ideas, please. Thank you. No official documentation required. Yeah.
The question persists. Like, why would they want to promote conspiratorial concepts? And this is something that I see in other areas, and I continually wonder about.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, I think, here is why they've taken this kind of, for lack of a better term, socio-political U-turn and begun to incorporate countercultural ideas into a film franchise which was, had traditionally been, associated very, very directly with the establishment, with the Pentagon, with the Department of Defense and the whole military-industrial complex. Why is this, film franchise which is now... which had previously been, promoting, basically being like a propaganda series for the military establishment. Why have they sort of done a U-turn now and have started portraying these organizations in a bad light? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it just, it does make me think a lot, because as you said before, we are seeing this in a lot of other films. I mean, if people who are listening have seen the latest Captain America film, this idea is brought out very, very strongly. So I won't go into the film or give away the plot or anything like that, but I would definitely recommend it in terms of just being able to see that this sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like countercultural rhetoric, and some of the countercultural themes and memes and the kind of anti-establishment, evil government, ideas, are being incorporated into big, successful, big budget box office Hollywood blockbusters.
It's the same genre even too. It's like the action adventure genre.
Yeah,
and it's like the same audience. You would
same audience. Yeah. And I think a lot of this stuff's directed at kids as well.
Yes.
I think that's an interesting thing to think about, and it just makes me think about concepts like revolutionary rhetoric and preparing people for the concept or at least sort of, I don't know, perhaps sowing the seeds of some righteous indignation of some sort, so that people start to get an idea of the government's bad and the system is bad and we need some kind of massive change, or we need some kind of savior, or we need some kind of huge global solution to this problem. Exactly. I think that's generally the message that's being portrayed in a lot of these big films that have started to portray these types of concepts.
Well, I think you got it there, Adam. That's what I keep thinking, because it very much seems like the establishment is making itself the villain, and when you ask the question, why would you portray yourself, the establishment? Why would you portray yourself as the villain?
Yeah. Well, you want chaos. You want chaos so you can create your order out of it. I think is the simple answer.
well, if you have an establishment and it's set up in a certain way, it's very difficult just to go about changing that. You've got vested interests in there, and you can't just change it overnight. But if the establishment wants to change itself, if that's its own desire, it's like, hey, we need to make these big changes, and we need to make them quick.
We need public opinion behind us.
Yeah. What you do is you make yourself the villain. All the aspects of the things that you want to change about yourself, you put out there as being bad. Like, oh, these are terrible. The government's bad. Because if people come over to the idea that the establishment is bad, then they will demand that it be changed. And if you have that change already in mind where you want to go, then you can get things going in that direction. So,
well, yeah. I mean, that's, for lack of a better term, to coin David Icke's phrase, it's kind of like problem, reaction, solution. If you've got an intended outcome, you need to make sure that, the majority of the populace are in support of it. So you create a situation in which they will be in support of it, so that those changes can come to fruition.
Yeah, I know. I think about this all the time, and I'm thoroughly convinced that that this is going on. That big changes are the desired outcome, and that's why we're seeing all the depiction of the system as being evil. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the purpose of the film was confusion. You know what I mean? Do you think that's possible, to confuse people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can always be, one reason, or, the primary reason, or one of the reasons for why, this could be done is purely to confuse people as a tactic of psychological warfare, Pure confusion is very powerful,
Yeah, and confusion, I think, is a good tactic to spur off revolution. You keep people confused, they don't know what's going on, then just chaos ensues.
Yeah, and the other, I think, positive. Well, I suppose the other advantage, for making people really, really confused, is that they can be more easily led in a certain direction when you supply, the heroes and the good shepherds and the sort of the public faces, the politicians, whoever, the countercultural leaders, whoever it may be, whenever you supply those people to the public during a state of mass confusion, people are far more likely and far more prone to sort of jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, and to go along with whatever that particular pundit is saying and support them, because they're desperately looking for something to identify with, and for a group to identify with, and to something through which to reestablish their identity, because they've been put into such a confused state. And so, I do think it's definitely possible that some of the techniques we're seeing in terms of like 3D and high definition, could just, at least in part, be used to deliberately confuse people, to further that overall agenda, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And I think it's worthwhile to point out the role of China in this film. They do go to China for a good portion of the end of the film. They're in China for a long time. They're definitely doing it for a reason. I think the simple reason that they portray China so much is that they're trying to get this film screened in China. Yeah.
I think you're right there, because as I said before, there was a lot of product placement which was very specific to the Chinese, the stuff that we can't buy, generally speaking, over here, or that maybe is less available or whatever, or brands we're not familiar with and stuff like that. But there was as I said before, I just noticed so many scenes where it was just blatant product placement. So maybe that was part of the reason. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons for why they would want to do that, though.
You know what's funny too is you have the U.S. government portrayed as evil and the enemy and bad, and you've got the Chinese government portrayed as being benevolent. Just for a second, there's a second where this character comes out and says, "The Transformers are destroying the city," and the guy says, "The central government will do something to stop this," basically, and it's done in such a way as you're like, oh, yeah, they're going to come in and fix things.
Yeah. Okay, so, in the previous 2 or 3 films, as I said, it's hard to, sort of, remember exactly what happens in all of these plots, because everything's so fast-paced. But, in the previous sort of 3 films, the Americans are the good guys, and it's all about, threats from abroad, be it Russia, China, or, some terrorist group, I can't even remember, But anyway, and we've got a role reversal in this film where, China is, I think far more, perhaps not portrayed as the savior, but portrayed as being, at least more just and more moral and more organized than the Americans. Like, the American military-industrial establishment is just, crumbling with corruption, whereas the Chinese kind of establishment has got much more of an organized system going on, and the sort of problem ends up getting not resolved, but the coming to a conclusion in China, or at least in Hong Kong anyway.
Yeah, I think that one of the simple explanations here is that if the filmmakers want this film to be screened in China, they have to portray the Chinese government as being good, because there's actually a government panel which picks the amount of foreign movies that are played in the country each year.
True.
And if it's unfriendly to them, it doesn't get screened in China.
That's right. Yeah,
so
the film censorship is very heavy over there. There's been a lot of uproar over films that have somehow gone past the censorship bureau and have reached the cinemas, and there's this huge hoo-ha about it's portraying China in a bad light. It's saying that we're the enemy of the world and the axis of evil and all this type of stuff. So a lot of intrigue there. There's a lot of information that we're constantly being given about how China's a threat, and one way in terms of just how big and powerful they've become in such a short space of time. In no small part thanks to the the various treaties that were signed at the United Nations in terms of trade and all the rest of it. But on the other hand, we're also constantly be given we're sort of constantly led to believe that the system that they have over there is actually more favorable to ours, and that they're actually getting a lot more done and are doing a lot more things right and don't have as many problems as we do, and that perhaps they are more of a model state, so to speak. We see a lot of this in the media these days, these almost two conflicting ideas.
Yeah, and in this film, the Autobots finally, and Optimus Prime finally ends up being triumphant in China, and he kind of blasts off into space from Hong Kong, from the port there in Hong Kong. He just flies up into space, and he's like, okay, now we can get things done. So you got to think about that a bit. Like, okay, so the ultimate good in this film is finally done there in China. So
well, it just reminds me of Edward Snowden doing his little protest in Hong Kong, talking about how great China was in terms of freedom of speech and the freedom to demonstrate and protest, and not be censored and shut down and shut up by government agencies and such, that kind of thing, which is interesting considering that China's like it's completely totalitarian communist state.
Again, you have the film board that has to approve the movies and things like that. So that's the government doing that, giving you your entertainment quite explicitly there.
Yep.
I mean, they do the same here, but they don't do it as explicitly as they do there.
It's just it's a lot more on. It's more sort of I guess more open, and I think they're a bit more strict with their censorship over there. But but a lot of interesting ideas in this film, and I mean, as I said before, I don't think the plot is really that important. It's just more ridiculousness, basically. It's just like how can we take all the existing ideas that we've already built in the previous three films and just keep them going for another film. They're hiring new cast as well, like the Shia LaBeouf or whatever his name is gone. There's a new guy in. He gets replaced with Mark Wahlberg, who's in every second film that has come out in the past year. He's obviously on his having his what do they call it, rebirth of in his career or something like that. But
he's in the limelight.
Yeah, he's in the limelight right now. But it's. I'm not quite sure what to make of the film, to be honest with you. I just think that it's very interesting that they've sort of, in number 3, but in more so in number 4, as we say, they've taken this kind of almost, socio-political U-turn and have started to incorporate, at least on a very sort of superficial level, cultural type ideas in a film franchise which is kind of primarily directed at a younger audience. Obviously, a lot of older people will see it as well because they grew up with Transformers in the 80s or whatever, but a certain demographic, shall we say.
Well, I think that they're trying to confuse people. I think they're trying to throw revolutionary ideas in there. And if there were a purpose in all this, which I want to believe that there is, I think that there is actually purpose in this. The purpose would be to lay the groundwork for a revolutionary movement that seems to be growing. And again, when we're talking along these lines, one has to wonder whether the whole conspiracy realm itself and alternative media, parts of that aren't, if they're not
Not if they're not. If they're not conscious of doing what they're doing, then they're being used to.
They're fulfilling a purpose, whether they know it or not. Yeah, and the purpose would be to bring about these great changes. You know what I mean? If you're railing on about how bad the government is, people are listening, people will want to replace that government. And the question is, well, what's it replaced with, and who is able to go about changing that? And
not a lot of people think that far, and especially if they're in a state of confusion, and especially if they're acting on an emotive basis rather than a sort of a critical and analytical basis, then they're not going to think that far for the most part. They're simply going to demand change, demand revolution, demand the demand that we sort of draw and quarter the evil ones, on public display, and so we can throw rotten fruit at them for a while, and then somehow just expect that things are going to sort themselves out, or the smart people or the right people will step in and clean up all the mess, and we'll have a nice society afterwards. I think that's definitely part of at least one of the reasons for why they want to create confusion, is to stop people from thinking further about the consequences of a concept like revolution and mass uprising.
I think that the reviews stand testament to what we're saying here, because all the reviewers are sort of in this daze. They're like, oh, it's just a mess of special effects, nothing made sense, it was confusing. That's what they're saying, and they're saying it's such a terrible film because they see no purpose in it. And I understand, because it is a confusing film. We're here in a daze trying to talk about this crazy thing, so it's obviously confusing. If that was the purpose, then success. If not, it's just a terrible film. It might be a little bit of both, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think that's probably maybe closer to the truth, maybe a bit of both. It depends who's watching, I suppose. I mean, it's weird. I've talked to people who are, I don't know, fairly uncritical and indiscriminate when it comes to what they watch. And we'll pretty much watch anything that comes out, fairly happy to watch 5 hours of television a day type thing. Even they've said, our Transformers 4 was just crap. It was rubbish. It wasn't even worth seeing. It was like, I didn't even know what was going on half the time.
Yeah, it got terrible reviews. People hated this movie.
Yeah. So it's interesting that they would do that. I mean, obviously, it gets highly promoted. It's a summer blockbuster. It's Michael Bay. We've got the previous 3 films. I mean, obviously, people start to get a bit fed up when the sequels start feeling a bit ridiculous. But it was still, fairly well promoted and fairly well known of, and whatnot. And people who have seen the first 3 would obviously go and see the 4th one and that kind of thing. So it is very, very, very interesting as to why they've done this. And I think that. As you say, and I agree, I think it's about sowing the seeds of revolution, and for lack of a better term, and beginning to foment countercultural ideas, which within a much larger demographic than before than you would usually expect, and to nurture some of those ideas, and so that future generations and younger people will begin to see, will begin to feel a need for, some kind of, or be led into some kind of radical change or some kind of revolutionary scenario, on a very, very emotive basis and almost on a subconscious basis where they're not really sure why, but, that's just how they feel,
Yeah. I mean, if people are satisfied, they're not very interested in changing anything, so you got to sow the seeds of dissatisfaction. I mean, to me, the popular alternative media, that seems like to be its purpose. It's just like dissatisfaction in anything and everything.
Yeah,
what
everything
I mean?
to make you dissatisfied with it. You're always, you're too fat or too skinny, or your skin's not the right color, or you know what I mean. You don't have the latest this or the latest that, or whatever it is, So
and I don't know. It's just dissatisfaction. I
mean, they definitely played on that in the first 3 films, in terms of how the sorry to interrupt, the the main protagonist, Sheila Booth, was always with a different girl, and I noticed they do that in a lot of films where they never carry a relationship throughout the series. I mean, I think Rocky was probably the only like majorly sort of like sequel film where they did that. They actually carried on the same spouse or the same partner throughout all different series, but in all three Transformers films, it was just this young guy moving from one girl to another, and in this situation, it's just. It's just ridiculous. It's just the protagonist is just some old dad who just happens to have a ridiculously cute young teenage girl, who's going out with ridiculously handsome young guy, or everyone basically looks like a model.
It's really annoying.
Really, really annoying. It's just so stupid and unreal. It's so just when you see the cast and you just look at the cast, it's just like. Right? Okay, we're in Fantasyland now. Yeah, it's just there's no bearing on reality whatsoever. Which is when you look at the faces and the features of the cast, in any of these films.
When it comes to promoting counterculture, again, I would say, because I like talking about this so much, I feel like the average person is well aware of pretty much anything that you'll hear on the Alex Jones show. I'd say the average person knows about that stuff.
Yeah,
and they have opinion on it one way or the other. They're probably. I'd say a lot of people are very open to that sort of thing. We're like, oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, on an increasing basis, yeah. I think it depends on where you are. I think it depends on which part of the world you're in and, maybe even the locality that you're in or whatever. But, I think I'm definitely seeing the same thing. You're seeing a lot more people, just the average Joe on the street, just talking about how, for example, the financial system is all fake and it's all corrupt, and the elites are building a new world order and this kind of stuff. So we are seeing this begin to grow, and I think that these big films are now starting to push people or push a much larger section of the populace in that direction. For the long term in terms of. New cultural ideas and new cultural norms and expectations and
and I just can't get over the fact that the average review of this movie doesn't talk anything about the CIA is. They talk about the CIA like this. I didn't read in any of the. I read a couple of the reviews. They didn't get into that at all. They just said that too much action. It was annoying. I was upset by this movie, and so those ideas are put out there. And they're ignored, but again, as you're saying, you're sitting there watching a 3D movie, so you're taking in everything subconsciously. So perhaps within the midst of all this confusion, and it's like a ridiculous movie, these ideas work all the better because you're unable to concentrate on them, and you're unable to even recognize them as being there. All you see is a bunch of action, you're tired, and you're sick of it. But meanwhile, your subconscious took in all those ideas, and perhaps all the better. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I think that's probably what they're trying to do here. I mean, unless Michael Bay is just being completely incompetent with his in his role as a director, which is possible. I think that's probably what they're doing there. And perhaps breaking off official ties with the Pentagon because those films were widely known to be associated with the Department of Defense. Or at least various branches of the DoD, breaking off that official contact and perhaps, taking things in a different direction, yet it's still being deliberate, it's still being, techniques, ideas,
I feel like
memes that have still come from the Pentagon in some way for a specific purpose.
I feel like they were going overboard to try to show that they were anti-establishment here. Like, look, we're broken free. See,
exactly.
See?
That's what I mean. Like,
the CIA's evil. See, we're not with them anymore.
That's what I'm kind of.
You can trust us now.
It's like, exactly. Like they become widely known for being the franchise have become widely known for being for having this association with the Department of Defense. So they're sort of overreacted, and just, made this big sort of, number 3 and number 4, which were these big sort of statements saying, sort of trying to placate the doubters and the skeptics, so to speak, or the detractors or whoever, and then saying, look, we're independent now, and we're going a different direction now, and they're sort of overcompensating for that fact, which is always a sign of, someone doing something very consciously and deliberately, usually because, whatever they're telling you is not true.
What we should do is watch for YouTube videos from people about Transformers for going, look, they're finally telling the truth,
Yeah,
where they're celebrating the film, like, and this film has the truth. You need to see it.
I think that's kind of part of it as well, actually. I think it's part of it as well is to kind of create a sense of trust again in Hollywood and trust in terms of these big films. And we've seen it, even like if you look at like the recent Batman films, most notably the Dark Knight, some of the Dark Knight Rises, where you have this, the antagonist, the Bane character, talking like legitimately about, basically a corrupt elite establishment living off the backs of the working class and just totally screwing them in every way possible, So he's bringing in sort of anti-establishment countercultural ideas into that sort of comic book, reboot. And we've also seen the same thing with Captain America. Now we're seeing the same thing with Transformers. And there's, probably quite a few other examples, although I can't think of them right now.
There's going to be more and more. I'm definitely noticing a lot.
Yeah.
Something's going on here. What it is isn't exactly clear.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it, what I was saying before, is I think a lot of it is to do with kind of getting, like, in one way they're sort of trying to nurture this sort of, countercultural temperament among certain demographics and sort of acclimate them more toward anti-establishment ideas. But at the same time, by doing that, they're trying to engender trust again. Because I think people had gotten to, I think they probably found that a lot of people had gotten to the stage where they were beginning to, basically sort of become sick of Hollywood and begin to doubt it and just begin to recognize how blatant the propaganda was, and just, even just the average person would just sort of maybe start walking away from these films like, oh God, they just seem like just a bunch of, just pro-military nonsense, and so they're maybe trying to respond to that in some way and doing what they're doing to try and sort of engender some more trust in the kind of the big Hollywood blockbuster establishment and all those production companies and all their ties to various military industrial companies and all the rest of it, trying to keep themselves relevant, so to speak, and still make themselves sort of or retain a sense of trust, I guess, whilst simultaneously kind of fostering, a revolutionary culture for the future in some way.
Now, do you have anything to say about the Dinobots in this film, Adam? Is there any little? Were you happy with the way they were portrayed?
The
Dinobots.
I think there were probably that resonated with me on a kind of a revisionist history level, I guess, more. If you look into a lot of the sort of fringe stuff within the sort of truth and new age UFO type movements and those types of cliques and crowds, there's a lot of stuff about ancient history, about how ancient civilizations might have been wiped out, and who really created us
by aliens and things like that.
By aliens, were we created by aliens? And all these, you've got Zachariah Sitchin rather, and you've got Rag von Daniken and a whole bunch of other writers that have jumped on board with that idea since, promoting that idea and just getting to all the speculation about what might have happened in the past in terms of like big Earth cataclysms and perhaps us being created by aliens or being visited by, or that kind of thing. And they've sort of mixed it in with religion as well, and all those types of ideas. I felt that in the whole Dinobot scene, when the very first scene of the film is basically Transformers basically destroying the dinosaurs. Evil Transformers, the creators of Optimus Prime and the rest of them. They're alluded to quite. So the Transformers themselves allude to their creators, which they don't know who they are. So it's the same idea, like these alien race of creators that go around the universe, seeding different planets, destroying different planets. We get the same idea in Prometheus. Same thing. I was about to say, Prometheus. You also see the same meme in a few other things. There's a TV show called Falling Skies on at the moment, which I've been following. I don't watch television generally.
It's an alien show, sure.
It's an alien invasion show, more about what happens to humanity after the event and how humanity deals with it, and the sort of a post-apocalyptic society, so to speak, and the resistance to this kind of invasion. But anyway. We're seeing the same idea in a lot of those episodes as well.
So we're hitting on some real memes here. We've dug out a few from this pile of crap of a movie here.
Yeah,
they're definitely in here.
We've put our gloves on. We've dug our hands into the dung, and we've come out with maybe a couple of nuggets. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I personally was upset that Grimlock didn't talk in this. Grimlock's voice from the original Transformers series, right?
Probably. I wasn't. I mean, I remember Transformers and I remember watching it, but I wasn't like a huge fan, so I'm not maybe as well versed in it as yourself. But
me, Grimlock, going to destroy Decepticon.
Was it?
That was the main Dinobot. So we didn't get to hear that fun voice.
Oh right. Was it in the previous films at all? Or?
This was in the old cartoon version. Yeah.
Oh right.
He's always me Grimlock this and that, so I'm sure that
comical character. I mean, there's always a couple of like comical, and they keep comedy going a lot. You'll notice throughout this film as well. There's always like just these dumb one-liners being constantly rattled off by one actor or another. Or even by some of the Transformers themselves on occasion. But
John Goodman played one of the Transformers, and he was kind of like a comic relief type character. Given those a lot of comic. It was a silly film, but I think there might have been a couple. There's certainly memes in there, and I think there was purpose in the overall story of the film, portraying the CIA as evil, things like that, being anti-establishment, trying to confuse people with the special effects and all that. I think that's going on here. I do.
Yeah, definitely, and the whole idea of the revolutionary rhetoric, so to speak, being sort of just incrementally embedded into this type of film, most notably in this film, Also, one of the things I kind of also found interesting was the portrayal of the CEO or director, rather, or whoever he was, of this military-industrial corporation, the guy who we described as being like a Steve Jobs, Ray Kurzweil type figure. He's kind of just a very eccentric prima donna basically throughout the first sort of 2/3 of the film,
he's very egocentric too.
Very egocentric.
This is my invention. When he has a full team working on it, it's like, be sure that you say that I made it.
Like he's got like a whole lab of scientists like working for him, and he walks in and they said, "We've created." He goes, "No, I've created."
Exactly. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. He's super egocentric, but we sort of see him. It's funny because they sort of portray him as being just, he's an idealist, he's a utopian. And there's a scene in the film actually where the main protagonist, Mark Wahlberg, who's kind of just a sort of a hopeless inventor living in the countryside, just trying to invent robots and do nothing. That's how the film starts out. He ends up talking to there's sort of an action sequence near the end of the film, and he ends up talking to the CEO of this military-industrial company, and says, "Look, I'm an inventor like you, so I know that you're intelligent and I know that you're compassionate," or something.
It's so weird because he's portrayed as evil at first, and then he's brought around to you like him.
Exactly. They convert him basically, and that's that kind of line there with Mark Wahlberg sort of saying, I'm just like you. We're inventors. We're good people. We're the people that shape the world. We're the people that make things better for the rest for everybody else. I know you've got a conscience, so do the right thing here. Don't go along with this evil agenda. Help us fight it. Whatever whatever the line was, it was that kind of thing. And
he does start defying the CIA.
He starts, at that point after that, he kind of switches allegiances. He's kind of being portrayed as just a guy who maybe just went off the rails a wee bit. It's not a big evil bad military industrial corporation. It's just one guy who got a bit egocentric and he needed a bit of a pep talk and a bit of a sort of a slap in the face and a kind of bring him down to earth again, and he's okay, and the corporation's okay and everything's fine.
I thought that was very strange too.
Pretty dumb. It was
weird. He was clearly evil at the beginning, and then he was the good guy at the end. It was like, and again, there could be definite purpose in doing that.
Well, I think so. I think it's just to basically.
Because people are scared of Ray Kurzweil's ideas. They're scared of him, okay, this is a bad guy. But then maybe they're made to come around to the ideas. He's not such a bad guy anyway. After all.
Yeah. There's that there. Definitely. I think there's a lot of that going on, but I think there's also just a very generalistic idea of there being, for example, say, the portrayal of these types of figures as being not. I mean, generally speaking, the types of people that be involved in these types of very, very big military-industrial corporations working on massive, projects with the government, generally tend to be pretty sociopathic, or at least what you might call low empathy types. They're sort of they're not sort of people who can be sort of swayed around into loving hippies within a few minutes of pep talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's just generally trying to get across the idea that these people that we think are bad in these big military industrial corporations, we think that are kind of evil and conspiring against us. A lot of them are just they're just like us. They're just kind of misguided. They've been misled. They've been corrupted by some of these government organizations, and so all they need is a bit of a hug and maybe a bit of a chat too, and they'll sort of come around again, and they'll realize the error of their ways, and they'll join you in your quest to defeat the evil out there or whatever. You know what's
interesting when you mention hippies, that specifically in the world of technology, you get this link to hippie culture, and that like a lot of these technology guys, these heads of big technology companies and whatnot, were really into like LSD or the hippie scene or whatever, and that was like, that was their inspiration. So it's funny that you put it that way, because a lot of times in real life we're made to think that, these scary nerds are actually peace-loving hippies. You know what I mean? Like, they're not evil. They're not out to create evil technologies. They're out to create something good,
a better world. Yeah, I mean, we see if people have seen the German film Das Netz, translates to the net as in the internet.
That's a good one.
The Unabomber. So Ted Kaczynski, LSD and the internet. It's called the Das Netz, the Unabomber, LSD and the internet, and it goes into the beginnings of the beginnings of cybernetics, beginnings of the internet, all the different academics that were involved in creating that, and how those ideas basically came out of and were related to culture at the time, more than anything else. So it goes into the link between technology and culture, and how those two things sort of coagulated in the 60s, and sort of. I think, if people watch the film, there's a suggestion that, Kaczynski might have had his head messed with at some point and might have been set up as a patsy, which I tend to think he was.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, that's a different film. We'll cover that some other time.
Well, we're talking about technology and all that. We can't help but do this sort of thing.
Sorry if we're on the loose again here.
I think we've talked enough about this crazy film. I think we've hit the themes and the memes quite enough. So I guess we'll end this episode right about here. What do you say, Adam?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's always going to be a million and one other things that we will, wish we'd mentioned. I mean, for me anyway, I always think of things that I wish I'd mentioned that I forget at the time. But I mean, the general idea with this film is it was just so crazy, so overloaded, so over the top, so intense that it just kind of put you into a different state of consciousness. And I think that was done deliberately. And I think that the basic themes and memes we've covered throughout this interview were meant to be, sort of embedded in the psyche on an almost semi-conscious or subconscious level. Definitely for a mass audience, I think. Yeah. It's either that or Michael Bay has just made a really, really terrible film.
Hard to say for sure. But we want to thank you for listening to this review, definitely. And if you like this podcast, we do one of these every month. We're thinking about doing even more than one a month here. We'll see how things go.
Many films. Many films.
Yeah, there's definitely tons of them. You can subscribe to the podcast at my website, ageoftransitions.com. Find my Trans Resistor radio feed. It's on there. So if you do like this, download it, save it, share it with people. Do whatever you want with it, and we will continue making these crazy reviews. We're not done.
No, we're not done yet. The sky's the limit, and there's so much that can be done under the banner of themes and memes. I mean, there's so many things to talk about, and there's so many ideas, and I think we're just going to keep going, and this thing's just going to keep getting better, and we're going to come up with more ideas and more things to cover, and I even made a little music video if people want to check that out sometime. I could probably post it on my website, but my website's a mess. So maybe you could post it on yours, Aaron, at some point, or
we'll have
on
to
a YouTube
post
channel.
That. And when it is, I'll let people know on my site. I'll put it on there for sure. So keep an eye out for that. It's the theme song to this podcast, which you made, Adam, and then you made a music video for it. In essence.
And it was kind of inspired by the Dave McGowan series, in a lot of ways, but I also cover a lot of sort of other subjects in it. It was pretty basic, done on an iMovie and stuff. I mean, the music I made all myself, obviously, that's all mine. But the rest of it's all just clips I got from like archive sites and YouTube and stuff, and just kind of put them into a visual sequence, which kind of, to me, represents a lot of what we're talking about and gives people an idea of the type of things we're talking about and why we're talking about them and how they all fit together. So I implore people to check that out and let me know what you think when you get the chance.
So thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe, download the episodes, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Today's episode of Themes and Memes was recorded on the 13th of July, 2014.